Hello and welcome to the Nirvana Strength Practitioners Panel podcast, where we explore the idea of human performance optimization. I'm Ian McLeod, the co-founder of Nirvana Strength, and on today's episode we'll be joined by Carli Dillen. She is a awesome powerlifter, super strong, and are you still the current New Zealand powerlifting squat and deadlift record holder? Is that still current?
Oh, we're going to start with a really contentious point.
Is that always contentious? Okay, we'll get back to that then.
We've just had our national championships, so I'll update you in a moment.
Okay, so we are recording our podcast today from the Haven Suites Bali Berawa Hotel. It is accommodations in the Canggu area set along the sandy beach, and it has everything to make your Bali trip epic. At least that's what they tell me. Yeah. Yes. So today's topic is specific to Carli's life and everything that's incorporated or a part of that. Yeah. So it's kind of like a little therapy session for Carli.
Thanks for having me, Ian.
Yeah, no problem. So I think maybe we just start with the contentious, what's going on with this?
We had our national championships just the other week in New Zealand, and I was not able to compete this year. So after the World Champs, where I placed 8th and had a really good 9 for 9 performance and set all the New Zealand records, I went on a holiday to Spain, jumped off a waterfall, landed on a rock and broke my ankle.
Wow.
So I've literally just come out of a moon boot just a few days ago after having reconstructive surgery.
That's pretty intense. How did it feel?
Which part? Breaking the ankle or watching the nationals?
Oh, I guess that's both be quite difficult, huh?
Nationals was really fun. So for me, I had 12 athletes competing, which is the most number of athletes I've ever had at our national championships. And they all had amazing performances. The breaking the ankle part was not quite as much fun.
So you're almost completely recovered now?
It kind of depends on your definition of recovery. Yeah. So last week on Monday, I was told that I've ruptured every single ligament in my ankle off the bone, completely ruptured.
Whoa.
And that was pretty bad news. So initially they said that I'd have to have another reconstructive surgery. But then I got a second and a third opinion, and they said because my muscles are so strong, my ankle stability in the damaged ankle is almost better than the stability in the non-damaged ankle.
Okay.
So by that logic, they said you'd have to get both your ankles reconstructed. So it's kind of a
interesting
mute point. Yeah.
Okay, but you've you've kind of had a history of injuries, no?
I knew you were gonna say that.
I mean, I wanted, it just for some reason I don't know. I thought there was quite a few injuries in your history, but you have a history of overcoming these very difficult kind of situations. So I feel like this is like you've done this before, right? You're like going to come back stronger and better. And
it's interesting to be known as someone with an injury history. Injury prevention is something I'm really passionate about. But I did have some pretty major injuries in my past. The first one, when I was 16 years old, I had an overuse injury called compartment syndrome. And that taught me a lot about training periodization, using scientific training methods to prevent injuries. So that particular injury, I had to have both my legs operated on. So I've been left with 20 centimeter scars down each shin. But what actually happened is the surgical scars got infected.
Yeah.
So I almost had my right leg amputated.
Okay. Well, that's pretty intense, you know. We're actually in the middle of getting you some ice, for the...
Please don't include that, please.
Oh, it's all right. It's all raw. We're not cutting anything. Yeah. But yeah, that's quite interesting, though. I mean, but from every obstacle that you've encountered, you know, whether they be injuries or whatnot, other aspects, other things that happen in your life, I think something that you do very well is, you're actually actively like trying to learn from what happened and how to make improvements.
100%. And I know that you're a huge fan of Stoicism, Ian. So you've heard this before, the obstacle is the way, and the things that you learn from overcoming adversity are things that will stay with you, important life lessons for the rest of your life, really.
So what did you learn from breaking your ankle on a waterfall?
I learned so much. Trust me, I regret that decision to jump that waterfall a lot. So I really...
Was there a lot of people jumping? Is it like you were
Yeah.
jumping into the water, yeah?
Yeah, so it was a group of friends that I'd met at a training camp in Spain who invited me to go on a canyoning trip. And I have to admit that the night before we went on the trip, I had to Wikipedia what canyoning was. I had no idea. And we were trying on wetsuits and harnesses, and the guy we went with really was very experienced and knew what he was doing. So basically canyoning is jumping or climbing down waterfalls. And
Okay, that sounds safe.
Yeah. The trail we were going down was about 15 kilometers.
Oh, wow, that's quite long.
And every single jump, I was the last person to jump. So I was probably the most fearful and the most cautious. And the first waterfall, I refused to jump. I just flat out refused. And I got a lot of shit from the group, I'm not going to lie. They were like, come on, that's what you're here for. Give it a go. You have to try it. So by the second, third jump, we were building up some confidence. Fourth jump. And then by the fifth jump, I was the fourth person to go. And unfortunately, just slightly hit the side of a rock as I landed in the water. So completely hidden by the water, hit a rock. I knew straight away I'd broken my ankle. And unfortunately, we had another 15 kilometers or so left to go. So
Whoa.
if you can imagine what it's like having a broken ankle in the first place, but then you have to keep going down waterfall after waterfall after waterfall for 15 kilometers, it was quite a traumatic experience.
So they probably felt pretty bad telling you to jump, huh? I would think.
Look, I can't blame anyone but myself. When you do these kind of activities, you make the choice, you make the decision, and if you go for it, then you sort of have to understand the consequences. What I can honestly say is I never even imagined the possibility of getting injured. That thought didn't even enter my mind.
Yeah.
It certainly does now.
I think that's quite normal. I mean, most, especially athletes, right? I mean, it's not something that, because if you are in a state of mind where you think that you're going to get injured, I mean, especially in combat sports or anything like that, if your thought process already is that you're going to get hurt doing whatever it is you're doing, you're already kind of screwed, right? Like you almost have to have like a Superman kind of mentality when you do stuff. But yeah, there's definitely risk reward with any action that we take, right?
100%.
But there's definitely some scenarios too, like, as coaches, right? And I think both of us, think about our members and our clients at a super high level with regards to doing stuff in a very safe manner. Right, is that there are a lot of scenarios where people are put into compromising positions, and they will do essentially anything that is asked of them because they just don't really know any better, right? So if we're thinking about, like, let's say the CrossFit scene, right, where there are definitely some really good gyms, but there's also a lot of scenarios where the coach is putting them in a compromised position, and there you can only put so much responsibility on the actual member or the client because they don't know any better to make that actual decision.
I think we have a huge care of duty to act with integrity as coaches and make sure that we have the best interest and welfare of our clients in mind always. So if we have more experience and more knowledge, then we certainly owe it to our clients to not put them in any sort of at-risk position. And it's actually a conversation I've had with a few athletes and a few of my coaches recently, which is when you've got the option or the range of different exercises to choose from, you have to weigh up the pros and cons for each athlete, which is the exercise that will get the maximum outcome with the minimum amount of risk. So there are a lot of movements, I think, in CrossFit that are fairly high risk. And could you achieve the same things using different movements? Absolutely. So I think we have a huge care of duty as coaches to be careful.
But you find this on all levels of fitness or sport, right? And there's so many examples of high-level coaches basically putting their athletes at super high risk for their own benefits.
We see that in powerlifting a lot. You'll get a talented athlete come into the sport and you'll see coaches program super high volume to try and squeeze every newbie gain out of this athlete and see them progressing super quickly to make the coach look good. And then that athlete will either have a higher risk of injury, get injured, or plateau for years to come and lose their enjoyment of the sport. So we do see that in powerlifting a lot.
And then even to pile on top of that, the coach wouldn't even take any responsibility for Like, oh, they would just say like, oh, he just burnt out, or oh, this guy just didn't have the body to handle it, or
there are risks in the sport. When in fact, with very careful programming and progression and progressive overload, you can really look after an athlete for the long term. So we really should be looking at doing that.
So as an athlete, let's say like someone or a client or a member or someone getting into their own personal fitness journey and trying to expand on it, like what would be some tips for them to like, what should they be looking for in a coach?
That's a really, really good question. I think particularly a lot of athletes now are seeing other successful athletes on social media. So I know that high-level athletes get a lot of requests through Instagram and Facebook to become coaches or to coach other people. And being a good athlete doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to be a good coach. You can be. I'm not saying they're mutually exclusive. The other thing that's really interesting is that having a high degree of knowledge or education doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to transfer that knowledge to your client either. So I think really what we should be looking for is a coach that has a high level of education but also a degree of experience. And the last element that we should look for is the soft skills. So even if you're experienced, know your sport, have a good educational background, you have to be able to communicate effectively with your athlete. And that means having a range of different communication styles and adapting to the person that you're working with. Yeah,
I think that part, the adaptability part, is quite challenging for most coaches. I mean, you find it in America and in a lot of the big sports like the NBA or NFL, where you hear of coaches being a system coach, right? Where they basically only coach or teach in a certain way, and they have no ability to actually look at their athletes, look at what they're really good at, and then try to maximize those things that each athlete's good at. Right?
I think you've really hit the nail on the head. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of laughing back here because we've had a lot of experience recently with coaches who are like, do as I say, like just trust the system, don't ask questions. And we know that one size really doesn't fit all. Everybody is so unique in their history, their background, what sporting background they've come from, how they communicate, how they adapt, how they evolve.
Yeah. But you do find that then there's also some part of it where you have systematic coaches who know that they are systematic coaches, and if they're really good at what they do, they will only take on clients or only take on specific people that would be a good fit for their system. So at least in some manner, they are they don't want necessarily to put someone in a bad situation. So they'll actually refuse, like if they have the option to, they'll refuse like certain clients because they know that maybe they're not ready yet. Maybe timing is an issue, right? Or maybe their body type is not good for what exact. So bodybuilding would be a perfect example, right? Like some people work on specific body types or specific categories because they know that they're really good at those categories, and they won't go off to other areas. Because I mean, bodybuilding as well, because I mean, from federation to federation, from category to category, like the requirements are very different, female to male, right? So some people specialize in females, and etc. How would you categorize your coaching style or methodology? Like, would you say you're systematic, or are you more?
I think my coaching style has evolved a lot over the last 12 years, and I'd like to think that I meet the client halfway. So I have systems in place, but I'm flexible enough to adapt them based on what the client needs. I have accepted a lot of clients who I love working with. I've also said to some people, I'm not going to be the right coach for you. I think this person might be a better fit. So I think that compromise is a really important word there. And the other interesting thing that you were talking about in terms of taking on clients is, as a coach, you have to know yourself. Are you just interested in working with elite athletes and people who you are going to turn into champions? Or are you okay with working with everyday people who have their own goals and struggles? And I think for me, a lot of elite athletes are going to make it anyway. Yeah. They're going to find a coach, and any coach is going to be able to take them to that level because they are that good or that gifted. For me, a huge challenge for challenging your coaching skills is, can you take an ordinary person or someone who's really struggling and help or improve them. And usually those journeys are the most incredible ones.
Yeah. But I think too, it makes a lot of sense with that in mind, that if there is a high level coach, like for them, it almost makes sense that they would partner up with coaches who work with lower level athletes, because then you would automatically have like kind of like a funneling system, right? But you do find that a lot of high level athletes will just say, come back to me when you're ready, but not providing any direction as to how do they actually get ready or get to that point where they're a high level athlete. Yeah.
I found a lot of high level athletes, and certainly in my own experience, if we want something, we will be relentless until we find it. I'll give you an example. When I was a 20-year-old, young athlete in Taekwondo, I looked up the best coach in the world. He had just been coaching the current world champion in my division. I didn't even have a world ranking. I flew to the Netherlands, knocked on his door, and asked me to coach me. So if you really want it, you will find a way.
Did he coach you?
he did actually. So his name is Willy van der Mortel, and to this day we're really, really good friends. That first training block, he did send me to hospital 3 times. Bruised rib, broken rib,
wow.
Cut lip. I think I cut my eye. I mean, he was brutal, but he certainly showed me where the weaknesses in my defense were.
Well, I mean, that sounds quite brutal. Like, it's beating you up. I mean, do you think there's a way that he could have? Was there a way he could have done that without giving you broken ribs, or?
Possibly, but you've got to meet this guy. I mean, the interesting thing is that we've been friends now for over 15 years, and we still catch up. And he's followed my CrossFit journey and weightlifting journey and powerlifting journey, and still writes on my Facebook. And if I ever saw him, I'd give him the biggest hug. We get along so well. But martial arts, the kind of training we did was pretty brutal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the purpose or the original intention of it is to actually like use it for combat, right? It's not that it was like meant to be like loving. You're not like in the ring like hugging each other.
That's true.
People playing patty cake.
People ask me that all the time. They're like, "What would you be like in a street fight?" And I think the problem with sport martial arts and Taekwondo is we had so many rules. So you can't kick below the belts,
right? And
you have to hit a certain way, and you have to control
all your
movements.
These kind of rules are that, right? It's a big reason why like someone like Bruce Lee didn't like to compete in these like regulated competitions, because he didn't think it would translate to real life.
Yeah, I completely understand that. But I will let you know that the only street fight I was ever in, I did win.
Oh yeah. Who was the street? It wasn't like a little kid or anything, right?
Oh no, it wasn't. Look, I regret this. Another thing I regret, but it was actually an Australian guy who was in the army, and I was 18 years old.
Okay.
And he had a few drinks, and he kept pushing me. And at one stage during the night, he kept, sort of goading me to fight him, and I kept saying no, and I kept backing away and trying to diffuse the situation. And then later on that night, he hit me, and he hit me in the face.
Whoa.
And my first reflex was just to turn and kick him in the head, and I knocked him out.
Oh, good for you.
But I mean, we're meant to be able to demonstrate self-control.
Well,
it was
did
just
eventually.
reflexive, and he did hit me. He like punched me square in the face. So I was not too happy about that. I probably should have blocked it if I was a better martial artist.
Well, was he like? Well, he probably hit you from behind, no? That's okay. You won the fight. It's a win. Yeah.
It was, and the next morning he requested a rematch. That was the interesting part 2. So I said, sure, okay, we'll have the rematch, but you have to get all your friends around in a circle, and we'll create a ring, and we'll have some rules around this. And he never turned up.
Oh, that's pretty sad. Yeah. Anyways, no, that's good. That's fun. That was a fun conversation. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever actually like gotten in a full-fledged fight. I've definitely had situations where, and the thing it like when I was a little kid, like elementary school, middle school, before I started playing sports, I would get bullied a lot. I was like a big fat kid. Yeah, I was like this big chubby kid, and then so I get teased a lot for being big. But then when sports started, and I started playing like football in the States, and I always ended up being like the strongest guy on all my teams. And so then once you started just getting kind of a reputation for being just really strong and playing a physical sport like football. I'm sure the same can be said with rugby players, right? Is like you just kind of, or if you see any guy with cauliflower ears, you're just kind of like a little bit hesitant to like fight that person.
MMA, UFC, but it's certainly a really great and amazing feeling, building strength and getting strong.
So not beating up the guy, that had to feel good too, no?
Well, that was the one and only time in 20 years of martial arts. I really did take the martial arts culture quite seriously, which was, try and diffuse any situation as best you can and use your powers for good.
Sure. That sounds good. It sounds like superhero stuff.
I miss those days.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think definitely there's certain aspects of culture now where, I mean, like you think about in the States, or I'm sure probably the same in New Zealand, where, getting into a fight and actually, like, even if it is in self-defense, right? If you take it to an extent where you're like just beat the crap out of somebody, could they take legal action against you?
Yes, 100%.
Same. I think it's same in the States too.
So in New Zealand, self-defense is defined as reasonable force, and you have to be able to justify it. And the best self-defense really is learning how to diffuse a situation and walk away.
Well, you just hit him once, you're good. Yeah. Okay, so but going along with the self-defense thing, this is crazy. Like in Korea, they actually people could actually use the excuse of I was drunk as a defense tool.
Really?
Right? Yeah. Because like even if they did like they had a violent action or they did something like illegal, they can actually like ask to be like the court to go lenient on them because they were drunk.
That's crazy. That absolutely
nuts.
shocks me.
And then also the self-defense laws that are crazy. So like if someone were like, let's say they were trying to stab me with a knife, and I was for some reason able to take that knife away from him, if at some point once that happens, once that like that split second where I actually took the knife away, then he is no longer considered an attacker, right? Wow. So if I were to, let's say, completely diffuse the situation and like knock him to the ground, then I would be liable as the attacker in that scenario.
That's really crazy.
Yeah. But there was like some things like this in the States where like a burglar like went into someone else's house, broke their ankle inside the other person's house, and then sued them for that.
Yeah, you hear about those cases a lot. New Zealand's quite different in that respect. You can't sue people, so we have an accident compensation system where it's basically prevented the ability to sue anyone for anything.
Really?
That's really good.
That's quite nice. In America, we get sued for everything. Wow, it's pretty bad. There's like that. The funny one I always think about is when there was like a lady that sued McDonald's because she spilled hot coffee on herself. Did you hear about that? That was like way back in the day. It was before they actually put the caution this contain like hot contents or caution something, right?
I think tourism in Bali wouldn't exist if you were able to sue people here.
We'd be screwed.
We were on an island today, and the amount of cliff jumping that was going on and restaurants that were saying, hey, you can jump off our cliff into the ocean. We're thinking like in New Zealand, health and safety would have that shut down immediately.
Yeah, that's probably not that is kind of an interesting thing, because you would essentially I don't think they actually would check the depth of the water, right? They would just put up the sign and say, you can cliff jump off here.
You can jump, yeah.
But they wouldn't know if there's any rocks down there.
No, there's no way to be able to check. So watching these people jumping off cliffs today certainly brought back a lot of memories from 2 months ago.
Okay. So moving on from the fighting and from all the violence, how do you balance the rest? I mean, because you now just sold off your second gym.
Yeah, I have literally just sold my second gym. I sold the first one right in the middle of the World Championships this year, and the second one during our national championships. So I'm really good at doing things at very stressful times.
So you're done with the gym thing?
I am. So it's been 10 years of owning gyms for me. I had a martial arts gym to start with that went from about 30 people to 400 people in a very short space of time. That turned into a CrossFit gym. That CrossFit gym turned into 2 locations. And the most recent gym was a strength and conditioning gym with powerlifting, Olympic lifting, and functional fitness.
So you were competing at a high level and running these gyms. How do you balance everything?
Look, it's a great question, and the honest truth is that I'm not very good at balancing things at all. So,
what do you consider balancing? Like, because people, a lot of times they think of balance, they think that everything has to be equal. But when I think about balance, is that, you know, there's going to be periods where you focus more. You obviously have like a high level focus on competition and low level focus on your business, and it's just kind of like it more teeters than it does. There's like an actual like equal amount of balance all the time.
Yeah, I like that definition that you've just described a lot. I'm definitely more of an all or nothing kind of person. So if I have an important competition come up that will take a lot of time and attention. So I guess where I feel my lack of balance is...
so you just let your company go to shit?
Well, I've learned a lot over the last decade in terms of putting amazing people in place to run those things for me. I've become much better at delegating. I think the hardest thing for me to balance is time with friends and family and significant people in my life, and still be able to accomplish my training and you know, entrepreneurial goals. I'm definitely better at it, but it has been a very conscious effort.
Yeah. Are there areas that you would work on things better, like differently than you did?
I think in the last year I made much better decisions than I have in the past, and I'll give you an example. So I pretty much sacrificed everything to come to Bali and train full-time for our World Championships, and I won the Oceania Championships and the Asia Pacific Championships, and I was having a really good build-up for the Worlds when I heard that my grandmother was sick. So the first thing I did was book tickets, jump on a plane and go and see her, and I'm so glad that I did, because before the World Champs, actually not one but both of my grandmothers passed away. So the fact that I was able to drop everything, realize that my family are the most important thing in the world for me, and go, you know, really shows where my priorities were and how I've kind of been able to change my life to be able to live to my values and priorities.
I think that's definitely an important aspect of just life in general, right? Like making decisions based off of the values and principles that you have. You know, for sure, like they might change over the course of your life, which, you know, hopefully they progress to some extent. But I think that definitely allows you at the moment, or in the moment, right, in any given situation, to make better decisions.
I think so too, and it's a stage-wise process where you have to first take some time to really think about what your core values and beliefs are. Take some time to think about what your perfect day and what your life looks like, and then live authentically. So try and make your life fit according to your values. I'm not sure that a lot of people do that a lot of the time. It's very, very easy to get stuck into the daily grind and the routine and think that that's the only way of life that is out there. But at the end of the day, we actually really have a choice, and we can make conscious decisions to do things differently if we want to.
What do you think is the most difficult part for people to kind of break out of this like systematic approach to life?
I think usually something really traumatic has to happen to push you out of that daily routine. For me personally, it was when my brother passed away, and I just realized that everything I thought was important was not important compared to having lost someone so significant in my life.
It's tough.
Yeah.
So Bali. So now you're okay. So now you're done. We'll make a big shift here. Yeah.
Let's change topics.
Okay. So big shift. So you sold your companies. You're done with competing for now until you heal up. Until you heal up.
No.
No.
So,
you're done forever.
Like a week after my surgery, I competed at the Auckland Bench Press Champs.
Oh, what I meant,
was,
like lower body. Some lower body stuff.
I've got my first 3-lift competition in November, and
Yeah.
I've got our bench nationals in September, and I also signed up for a bodybuilding competition in September, which is very much out of my comfort zone, but I think will be a lot of fun.
Okay.
So definitely still competing, because it's something that I really love and enjoy, and I need to have a focus or a goal.
Or what?
Or something, but having sold off the gyms, the next step for me is to go back to university and do my PhD.
Yeah. What are you doing your PhD in?
someone who I respect very, very much, Dr. Eric Helms, he had a conversation with me once, and he said, you have to pick a topic that you are so passionate about that after 3 years of grinding away at this topic and studying, and it's going to be really hard, you still have to love it and still be passionate about it. So I've decided to do it in mental health combined with strength and conditioning training.
Oh, that's quite an interesting combination.
So the idea is that there is something about training with a barbell that changes some psychological constructs that I believe could be a therapy or adjunctive therapy for depression, anxiety, mood disorders. Basically, you gain a sense of mastery, you build self-efficacy, resilience, grit, all these constructs that we know are the opposite of someone who feels depressed.
Does it have to be, is it specific just to movement with a barbell?
I think there's something different to resistance training with a barbell compared to training on machines. Whether or not there is, we'll find out.
Okay, so you'll definitely like compare and contrast. And
I'd like to, 100%. I think maybe you're asking from your perspective. I know you do a lot of calisthenics training. Would that transfer? I think it would. The problem with research is you have to try and to design a really good research experiment, you have to be super specific and try and control every variable.
That's definitely something very hard with gymnastics, strength training, calisthenics, because the variables are just so many. Yeah. But
exercise in general, we already know, is a great therapy to prevent or treat depression or anxiety.
But I definitely think with regards to like exercise, I mean, there's a lot of like doctors would say that like, exercise is beneficial, but they would recommend their client to do exercise. But I don't know if that's really that much different than telling someone who knows they need to sleep that they need to sleep more. Like there needs to be more direction. So I think something like the study that you're going to do, like that's very specific to barbell work, like at least maybe it would start narrowing down. It's like you should do exercise with, you should do powerlifting, or you should do something more specific instead of just saying exercise, because right now the fitness industry is so very, not in a really good way, I don't think. Like there's like beer yoga and cat yoga, and there's like all these really weird. Serious? You don't know about this?
I don't know about cow yoga.
Not cow, cat
cat yoga.
Cat yoga. I thought of cat cow. The yoga thing. Yeah. So yeah, there's like all these different animal yogas. Where you do yoga with your animal friend. You do yoga with a beer.
So Amber, who's listening to us here, she does yoga with kittens. It's adorable. It's really adorable.
Okay. So maybe something they could prescribe a little bit better than just saying like sleep more or. But anyways, I think it's quite interesting what you're.
I think I know what you're saying. I mean, originally when I went to university, my aim in life was to become a medical doctor, and then I sort of realized that I was more passionate about prevention rather than treatment, and that's why I got into sport and exercise science and physiology and so on and so forth. So the amount of time that a medical practitioner has to help a patient make really important habit changes in their life, it's so limited, and that's why we need to have educated coaches and educated trainers who can bridge that gap. Once you receive your exercise prescription, how many clients do you see come into a gym who don't know how to do anything or don't have a program to follow, and they don't have the self-belief or the confidence to even get started? The gym environment is so intimidating. So to be able to take that person from the beginning and progress them through exercise as a therapy or as a treatment is so immensely powerful.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think some of the issue. I mean, there's definitely multiple issues that come with becoming a personal trainer or coach. Is that one? There's like a very low barrier to entry. I think getting let's say your 2-day CrossFit cert and you become a CrossFit coach, or in Bali, there's like hundreds, if not thousands, of yoga certs giving out every single month, and there's not really much quality control. Probably not so much in the science industry, because you have to go through so much study and so much that there's already kind of like the natural like vetting process. I think particularly like certifications, I would think there'd be a lot more benefit if they actually had more emphasis on like critical thinking and the actual practical application of the knowledge, as opposed to just having everything be like, all right, you got to score 70 on this multiple choice test, which maybe you can take like 3 or 4 times a year or even more, you know.
I think I was really lucky when I started CrossFit. The 2 coaches who I worked with the most, one had a master's in exercise rehabilitation.
Wow,
and
that's
he was
big.
Yeah, it was very impressive. An amazing coach by the name of MTS Desai, and he helped me rehabilitate my knee after my first knee reconstruction. Basically went from, you know, falling over as I tried to walk in a straight line to eventually winning a world championships. So the work I did with MTS was incredible, and he had years and years of university experience as well as his CrossFit certification. And the other CrossFit coaches I worked with, all of us actually met at university while we were doing our postgraduate studies, were Darren Ellis and Tamron Barber. So of 4 of us at university, we all ended up with CrossFit gyms, and all of us had a postgraduate education. So that sort of set the CrossFit standard for me. Maybe that's unusual, but I have an enormous amount of respect for those coaches and all the education and background and practical experience that they had.
Well, I think that is very unusual in that realm. I mean, well, actually, in any fitness related field, really. Like having someone who has, like, let's say, a physio background or a rehab background or any real knowledge of like anatomy, right? And how much that benefits actually being able to teach movements properly.
Hugely beneficial. I did my undergraduate degree in sport and exercise science purely because as an athlete I was really interested in sport and exercise science for my own career, and applied everything from lectures directly to my own training, and I think that was hugely beneficial. I did the physiology degree because at that time I thought I would enter medicine, and then did my postgraduate studies in movement neuroscience, where I was just absolutely fascinated with mental skills training, motor imagery, skill acquisition. And even though I'm not as involved in the type of research that we were doing back then, having that kind of background is really useful for interpreting research studies that come out now. The context in terms of how the body works, like you said, physiology and anatomy. So I would highly recommend any trainer to go back and do, you know, some functional anatomy or some rudimentary physiology papers for sure.
I think one thing that I really enjoy about like talking with you, like really about anything, is just the way that you critically think about, I mean, everything. You're a little bit of a
Geek.
nerd, yeah, a little bit of a nerd. All you need is the glasses, right? No, I think it's really cool, and this is the kind of the main thing that kind of connects all the practitioners that kind of come on the podcast, is that no matter what their particular craft is or what their industry is, like they have very similar ways of thinking about how they're just like breaking all this down, thinking about all the very specific components of let's say their movements. We had a couple of Flair bartenders on, and they're just talking about like the way you would talk about doing the deadlift, like they would just break down every single component of like, how do I flip this bottle like
wow
3 times? It's crazy.
It's really interesting.
It's really nuts. And so like, even though there's certain competitions or things that I wouldn't necessarily have like really high level interest in, if I always, anytime that I have the opportunity to like see like the world champions of anything really, even if it was like world champion, I don't know, like badminton or whatever, I think it's very interesting to watch them like perform, to then like be able to speak with them on their craft and how much they think about just the smallest like of nuances that you would never even think of.
What I love is that through Nirvana Strength, you have brought all these people together, and you give your athletes the opportunity to learn and listen to all these amazing guests that come through. I really admire that, the number of workshops and guests that you have on a weekly basis. It's impressive. So what are your future plans for Nirvana Strength?
Well, when are you going to do a workshop at Nirvana?
Oh, I would
See,
love to
turn
do
that
some
back.
strength workshops. definitely be interested in doing some strength workshops,
Yeah.
and even, we've talked a couple of times about maybe having a powerlifting competition.
We would draw so many people.
We
for
would,
that.
yeah. And earlier in the year, for those of you that don't know, Ian and Tara competed in their first powerlifting competition, and they won. They did amazing. They had just stellar performances.
Tara just walked off the street. Tara's one of our coaches at Nirvana, and she just like walked in without shoes and.
She just came to watch Ian. She came to support, and we kind of saw her walk in. I was like, "Hey, Tara, you should enter. I think you do really well." And she did. She crushed it.
Yeah.
She's an amazing sumo deadlift.
So what do you? So let's talk about that. So sumo deadlifting and conventional deadlifts. Is there pros, cons? What do you prefer yourself?
For me personally, I don't really have a choice. So I have a 2x2 centimeter hole in my right knee. So every time I've tried to do sumo, I've actually dislocated my knee joint, which is not a pleasant feeling. So I'm
really don't have a choice.
Like, don't do it. Yeah, I'm stuck with conventional, but I really love conventional deadlifts, and I think it's a great movement that transfers to other athletic movements. So I'm quite happy to stick with conventional. For my athletes, I really look at their training histories and body types, and I have about half and half all conventional, half all sumo. And if you look at the top lifters in the world by weight class, there's sort of a bit of a pattern where the smaller lifters will tend to sumo deadlift and the larger weight classes will tend to conventional, and the middle weight classes are about 50-50.
Do you know why that is? Ooh, stumped you?
Yeah, there has been some research coming out recently. So the latest article that came out about sumo deadlifting, the only anthropometrical feature they found that correlated with the sumo was torso length. So that was really interesting because for a long time we've sort of thought maybe it was more related to arm length or femur length, but torso was the only factor that correlated. But most coaches will suggest that because of training history and muscle insertions and personal preference, as well as mobility and flexibility, try both, see which one feels the best for you, possibly even train both, and then see which one is stronger as you hit your blocks, your training blocks or your peaking blocks closer to competition, and then make the best decision at the time. So for most people, I would say train both.
Cool.
Just not me.
Just not you. So let's say if most people, like maybe a lot of people think of deadlifts is just like you just pick up the bar and just lift.
Pick it up.
Right? Pick it up and get off the ground. I mean, what are some of the things, you don't have to give like a full breakdown, but like what are some of the, can you maybe explain or give a short breakdown of like how complicated it can be, like on a higher level?
I mean, the deadlift looks like a simple movement, but how many times have you walked into a commercial gym and seen people do it wrong? So I think the most challenging part about the deadlift is creating whole system stability. How can you engage and contract and stabilize through every single muscle and joint in your body? And if you think about that and the complexity of that task, that takes a lot of concentration. And when we look at skill acquisition, our brain can only really handle a few, or even one cue at a time. So it takes years and years of repeating that movement and motor pattern before you can really start to isolate every individual muscle and create that whole body tension. So I think that's really where the magic in deadlifts is. Cool.
Yeah, that's
it's one of my favorite lifts. One of my favorite 3 lifts.
What would be your second then?
My favorite lift is actually the bench press, so I love bench.
Yeah.
It's the one lift that I can do any day, any time. As much of it, I don't quite feel the same way about squats.
So on the squats too, for competitions, are you only allowed to do? You're only allowed to do, what was it, low bar, high bar? You can do both, or? You
can do any squat you want. Typically, an advanced or an elite powerlifter will squat with a low bar because biomechanically you can lift more weight in that low bar position, just in terms of using more posterior chain muscles and the moment arm being a little bit shorter. But a lot of powerlifters will train high bar squats as well, just to get a little bit more quad development and maybe to take a little bit of load off the back. But in competition, you'll see most powerlifters will compete with a low bar squat.
Is there anything that's being done with regards to like the style of training or programming at some of the higher levels that maybe you don't necessarily agree with? Like, is there a lot of dissent? Like, is there a lot of argument over any aspect of doing any of those 3 lifts? Or is everybody kind of like on the same page?
There are lots of different programming styles coming out, and a lot of the styles work. I think the latest trend that I'm not 100% sure about is programming by artificial intelligence. So I have recently had a few athletes who have been programmed by artificial intelligence and basically been injured. So I think there's huge value to talking to a coach who has experience and an intuition as well from years of experience.
I think artificial intelligent programming would basically just be based off of like statistics, right? It'd be based off of numbers, and they would maybe give you something that would work for the majority of the time, but they wouldn't necessarily know because there's just so much information that goes into it, right?
There is so much information. So I'll give you an example. When I'm selecting attempts for my athletes at competition, I need to know their weight, their nutrition, their mindset, how much sleep they've been getting, how their training's been going, what numbers they've hit in training, what did they lift at previous competitions. And you can certainly use artificial intelligence to try and control all those parameters. But at the end of the day, nothing really beats having a conversation with your athlete and listening to them and what they want to get out of that competition and what they feel they're capable of, in conjunction with all that information that you've collected over the months of training as well. And personally, I like the coaching relationship. I love learning from another person, and the back and forth and the questions and the interesting conversations that come from that.
So what do you usually recommend for people to like just before competition or before they're doing lifts? Are there certain foods you have them eat?
We're pretty careful about body weight and nutrition throughout the entire training process. So if I've got an athlete that's close to weight, they will check in every evening and every morning, and we will adjust their nutrition based on where their body weight is at and what outcomes basically we need to achieve.
So would you recommend that, like, maybe I would eat like a Snickers bar before a competition, or you have a favorite vice?
That depends. Did you weight cut to be able to make weight for that competition again?
But I mean, let's say after you weigh in the mornings usually, yeah?
It's a 2-hour weigh-in.
2-hour weigh-in.
2 hours.
I mean, once the weigh-in's done, then you can just eat whatever you want, yeah?
You can, but say, for example, an athlete cut weight to make it for a competition, the priority is to rehydrate and get fluids into them. So we use rehydration fluid like Hydrolyte, for example. That's the main priority. We'll shuttle electrolytes, maybe some creatine into their body. Then we are looking at simple carbohydrates and sugars because powerlifting relies on those, quick energy systems.
So like gummy worms.
100%, yep. Gummy lollies all the way. And then we know that fats slow digestion, so we want to try and sort of we don't want to slow digestion while we're trying to get carbohydrates into the body, so we might leave fats for a little bit later in the day.
And yourself, what would you do, or what did you do after you won competitions? Did you have like a go-to like food or go-to something you did to celebrate?
I want to say yes, but like
Bottle
the last
wine, throw back a few brewskis.
I'm trying to think of what I did after my last competition. The truth is I have so much caffeine. Like I have an enormous amount of caffeine. But at the same time, during the competition, that I'm so tired and so hyped on caffeine all at the same time. And because I normally have to cut weight, I've had, a large amount of fluids. You get to the point where you really don't want to eat anything else. You're just exhausted, but you can't sleep. So it's
that sounds horrible.
It's kind of a little bit horrible, actually.
So have you ever done a like a bodybuilding or fitness kind of competition before?
No, I haven't. I've
Is that something
prepared.
you'd be interested into doing?
I am interested. I was interested years ago. So before I found powerlifting, I think it was after my 3rd and 4th knee reconstructions that I contemplated doing a bodybuilding show, just as a goal to help me in the gym to rebuild the muscles that had been wasted away post-surgery.
I think it's definitely an interesting process for sure.
It's an interesting process, and I think that's why I really want to do it, sort of as a bit of an experiment to understand what bodybuilders go through, because I do have a lot of respect.
It's quite horrible, actually.
Yeah, but you've
really
got to
bad.
respect their dedication.
Oh, they're definitely dedicated.
Have you done a show before, Ian?
I did it once.
Oh my gosh,
it was
wow.
horrible. Yeah, I mean, I definitely got it was the leanest I ever got. I was down to, so the largest I ever was 110 kilos when I played football. I was like 21 years old. But at that time, my low bar back squat was 300 kilos, and my bench press,
decent.
my bench was 190. But then I got down to 76 kgs for this competition, bodybuilding competition.
76 kilos down from 110. That's outrageous.
So 76, I had to be like 3-4% body fat. But I looked amazing, but on stage I felt like just absolutely horrible.
Did you have to do a posing routine?
I didn't get that far, unfortunately. I was in Korea, and my weight category was there was like 150 people in my weight class. So you wouldn't do like you wouldn't do a solo routine. Like everybody does the same poses on the first stage, right?
The compulsory
so
poses,
I wouldn't, so I didn't get to do like my own posing routine for the next stage. But I didn't show you any pictures. I'll show you some pictures.
You can show me pictures, but it sounds like the experience was worthwhile, but you didn't really enjoy. It was an interesting experience. You didn't enjoy not being strong. Well, I mean, I've always known you as a really strong athlete, and
thank you. I didn't enjoy it like how static it was. You know, it's just you kind of just like hit a pose and you just like stay there, and so for me, I always played sports, ball sports. So we're always moving around. It's very dynamic, and obviously you have a lot of teammates as such as well. But with regards to nutrition, obviously I kind of basically wasn't able to eat so many different kinds of foods, and then once the competition was over, I just gorged myself on all these foods, and it was seriously, it was like real life Nutty Professor. I swelled up so much. I gained 10 kilos in less than a week.
Wow.
And my skin was just getting stretched out. But it's just all the fluids, the salt, all the salty foods that really made me kind of just blow up. And so I didn't like the way that all that process kind of made me feel. And I think that a lot of bodybuilding athletes kind of go through these massive phases of yo-yoing, right? Where their off-season weight is just so much higher than their competing weight, and I mean that's generally why too. You find, especially the larger the athlete is, generally their lifespan is much shorter, and their body falls apart super fast. And there's obviously a lot of drugs involved. I was not one of them. I've always been clean. No drugs for me. I mean, recreational drugs, but no testosterone, no steroids or what are some of the other ones?
I guess the coaching process, preparing an athlete for the stage, the posing routines on stage are important, but what you've just highlighted is the coaching portion.
Oh, I didn't have a coach.
That takes place.
Yeah, and I was very young, and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, that definitely could have been done a lot better if I had a coach, for sure. That would have helped out.
I think that post-competition coaching is really important. That's where most bodybuilders or athletes really struggle, is how to safely gain that weight back on. And I'm talking about mental health and physical health. How can you safely build your off-season weight? A lot of bodybuilders I've spoken to now maintain their weight more or less quite within a limited range on season and off season.
It makes a lot more sense. I mean, someone that I took a workshop with, I can never pronounce his last name correctly, but it's Milos Sardovic. But he was really well known for being able to compete basically year round, and he was just always like competition ready, all the time. But when he talked about what his lifestyle was like and how much energy and he had to put into being very, very specific with what he was doing, was just next level. He just basically didn't have a life outside of his competing.
It certainly requires a lot of dedication. A lot of the coaching groups that I really, really admire, and I say groups or teams because they now work with physical preparation coaches, nutritionists, but also psychologists. So that really is the best trifecta, I think, especially for a sport like bodybuilding, but even for powerlifting. I think we need to have professional psychologists to help cover that side of training.
The issue with something like power or with bodybuilding, and maybe even like powerlifting as well, right, is that there's no money in it. I mean, unless you're like a super, like one of the top people in the field, like you're not making any money. So you're forking out massive amounts of money and time just to prepare alone. Unless you're going to be like a massively dedicated person in that craft, like you're not really going to go out and hire, high level coaches, which, unfortunately leads to suboptimal results.
Well, there's some truth to that, because some coaches are certainly expensive. I think generally speaking, in our area of work, coaches don't actually charge enough. I think more coaches need to value themselves and be charging more. But I also think that we live in an era of technology where this information is at your fingertips. We can now access all kinds of journal articles and experts and research. Just by doing a little bit of work on the computer.
But this is also where I think like I would separate like actual real coaches from people who just are like they just program really well, or they is that like a coach needs to have the ability to actually assess and look for actual like weaknesses in the athlete's movement and help them correct those and make modifications and help them become better. I think that's the thing that separates like just an everyday personal trainer from an actual like coach. And so I'm always hesitant to they say in CrossFit, like you become a CrossFit coach as soon as you pass the level 1 cert. It's like, well, you don't actually have any capabilities to actually assess anybody. So I'm always hesitant to call people or use that word coach.
It takes years and years of watching different bodies and different types of people moving to develop that critical eye to be able to assess movement. I will stand up a little bit for CrossFit because I think their CrossFit Level 2 certification is really good. They teach you...
the Level 1 now you can do online.
Oh, yeah. Level 2...
I just heard that like a couple days ago. I actually don't know if it's true, but someone told me.
It's in person, and they teach you how to coach static movement as well as dynamic movement, and they assess you and they give you feedback. So I think I like that course. I've done it twice now, so I give it a little bit of credit. But really, it takes years and years of watching people move and really looking at movement patterns and doing your research. I was lucky to do a couple of internships in a biomechanics lab, so that kind of stuff was part of my research at university.
But I would say, okay, so even still, like, let's say the CrossFit Level 2 is good. Now, is it good relative to all the other stuff that's going on, or is it actually like good? Does that question kind of make sense? Like, because I think that the standards are so low that even if something is slightly better than that, it's still not very good. Yeah. I think the standards can be raised more. I think there could be more emphasis on giving this corrective feedback. And I think, I mean, if you think that the CrossFit Level 2 was good, I mean, I think you're a really good coach, so I would believe you without hesitation. But how is it like compare with like where do you think it should be?
I believe it's a starting point, to be honest. So you do these courses, these weekend courses and certifications, and it's to inspire you to get started. So at my gyms, for example, we always had really lengthy internships. Depending on the background of applicants, of people who wanted to learn how to become a coach, they would either do, 3 months would be the absolute minimum, but a lot of our intern coaches were interns for 12 months or 2 years. So they're shadowing coaches, they're looking up, reading material, YouTube videos, doing regular workshops where their coaching skills are assessed, and just doing hundreds and hundreds of hours
Sweet.
Watching athletes move.
I would love to talk to you more about that.
I know that it's something awesome that you've been working on and developing and taking your coaches
hard.
through.
Yeah. But wow, 12 months to 2 years?
Absolutely, and a lot of our coaches have gone on to open their own gyms internationally and within New Zealand, or are still coaching at our facilities. We had the most success growing our own coaches rather than sort of hiring externally, because they were part of the community and part of the culture, and they loved what we were doing.
No, I think that's really cool. I mean, I think having someone who's actually willing to put in that kind of time and effort and as an intern definitely shows that they actually have another level of interest, as opposed to just saying like, the hard part about, like, especially with people applying for jobs here in Bali, is like you don't actually know if they want to be a coach or they just want to come and live in Bali, and they just happen to, they could just happen to do personal training on the side.
I think the equivalent in New Zealand is you don't know if it's an athlete who just really wants to do their own training and coaches just to earn some money in the meantime, or if it's someone who wants to be a career coach. So I think there's some parallels to that situation in Bali.
Some of that with regards to becoming a career coach can be difficult for people, especially when you were saying before about how people don't charge enough as a coach, right? Especially when they're really good. How do you tackle that for yourself? That's a long. Okay.
Yeah, that's a hard question.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like we did recently, like for us, like we had a retreat group that that wanted to use our facilities for the weightlifting, the lifting area that we have, and we know that it's the best here in Bali with regards to the equipment that we have and the bars and stuff. And we have a specific amount that we charge per person to use the facility, and they were like, oh, we found this other place that charges it was like 30% less than what we were charging. And then they were like basically trying to use that as leverage to be able to train at our place for that same amount. And I basically told them no. I was like, you can go train at the other place, it's okay, like you don't have to pay for our facility. And some people would see that as like lost funds or lost money or whatnot, but I think, if you start to, where does it stop, right? Eventually, how do you stop from devaluing yourself if you're just going to be so easy to just be like, all right, yeah, you can do it for this much. I understand that some people can be hard pressed with regards to like they need to make funds, but I don't know, it's definitely a tough thing to do for sure.
I think what you've described is what most mentoring companies, we worked for Two Brain, which is a CrossFit mentoring company, and they certainly teach those principles that you can't make exceptions, because where does it end? And what happens when you've got two athletes paying different rates standing next to each other? Why is one on a special program compared to another? So that's something that I know a lot of gyms and a lot of coaches struggle with, is figuring out where their price point is and then sticking to it.
I think part of it too is, it goes to basically like talent evaluation, right? So you think of in major sports, right? You're paying even athletes that can play the same exact position. How do you justify paying someone a massive amount of money versus someone else, right? I think as a coach, though, it does become difficult to, how do you, in an objective way, decide like what coaches are better and how much better are they than the others? Do you have a system to help with that, or you just kind of do it like, oh yeah, you're a good coach, I'm gonna give you this much, and then you're not so good, so I'm just gonna
personally at my gym, all our coaches have the same pay scale. I actually lost a really talented coach not very long ago, so just over a year ago, who argued that she should be paid more than the others who had equal level of experience and qualification. And I said, I'm really sorry, I have to treat you guys all equally. So our pay scale is very much up front, and what you see is what you get.
So they all get paid an equal amount depending on their level of experience?
Yeah, well, it's all clearly laid out so that they know upfront what our expectations are, and vice versa. But I'm kind of talking about a past life now, because I no longer own those gyms.
Yeah, but it's still good to, I'm sure there's people who deal with these kind of, with anything, right? Any kind of company that you would own, you're going to be somewhat of a talent evaluator, right? And if you're interviewing someone for a particular job, let's say, operations manager, and one person's asking for using Indonesian money, 6 million per month, or 8 million, or 10 million. And for those of you that don't know Indonesian money, 10 million is, it's like well, it's like 10,000, or no, it's like 10,000, no, 1,000 New Zealand dollars. Yeah, it's 10 to 1, yes. So it's 1,000 New Zealand dollars per month, right? Which actually in Bali is actually a pretty decent amount for the locals here. But yeah, anyways, like...
I love interviewing coaches, so that's part of the process at the gyms that I really, really enjoyed. And over the years, we learnt to really interview people based on their values and how much they care about other people. So that was the most important criteria for becoming a coach at our gym, was how much do you care about other people? And everything about coaching and movement, we could teach them, but we couldn't teach them how to be a good person who cared about others.
How do they have to write like a poem or something?
They're pretty close, actually. So part of our process was to submit a CV, but also an essay describing why you're passionate about coaching and how you think you can best use your talents to help other people.
Oh, that's nice.
And then they had to do an interview, and then they had to do a trial class.
Oh, mock classes, yeah. One of the things I've had if they happen to be in the area is I have them actually participate in a class, and even through, like, you can see through their own movement, do they actually apply any of what they're actually saying in their CV to their actual practice. And it's quite unusual that you find, actually it's quite normal that you find a lot of trainers who don't even know, like, even very basic movements. Yeah, it's quite... We
ran a course for one of the fitness colleges in New Zealand where you can get a personal training qualification. I think this one was a year-long course. And we had that group of students towards the end of their qualification. And I would say that 90% of them didn't know how to perform a bodyweight squat.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Wow.
They'd never been taught how to squat properly, and
so it's just all books, basically.
Therefore didn't know how to teach other people how to squat. I'm not entirely sure what they had been taught, but we had to go through very basic squat mechanics and all the way through up to barbell squats.
So are they doing mostly just theory book stuff?
I'm not sure, to be completely honest, what their curriculum was.
Yeah.
I suspect that a lot of their practical sessions in the gym were maybe machine-based. And I also know in a lot of the personal training courses in New Zealand, they teach business skills, which I think are really useful and important. But I think teaching movement should come before
teaching the business
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I do find that, I mean, in the States, I mean, there's just so many different certification programs. It's really hard to... Let's say I wanted to become a personal trainer, or I wanted to go into this field. Are there some certification programs that you think personally that are really good?
So in my hometown of Auckland, New Zealand, we have 2 universities that have essentially sports science degrees, and the university I went to was very science-based, very theoretical. We did have practical sessions, but it was basically a degree on how to be a scientist in sport. Whereas the other university, AUT, has a sports science degree that's very practical. So it's very much coach-based, hands-on, practical in the gym. And I think that from what I have seen, that degree has been hugely beneficial. We took students who were doing that course, and they did their internship at our gym for sort of 3 to 6 months at a time. And I was really impressed with the practical knowledge that those students had.
That's good. So anything that would generally have more practical components?
I really think you need both.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need the theoretical, you need the practical.
Cool. So besides lifting, training, reading research papers, what do you do for fun?
That is fun.
That's fun. That's the thing, is like I had this conversation with people all the time, and it's like, what do you do in your free time? It's like I read books on how to get better at whatever it is, like philosophy or business, and people are just like, really? You don't just like go drink? Or
no, not really.
What would you do for fun that most people would join you in?
Oh, I would say travel.
Okay.
So I definitely like traveling for fun. I like doing adventure sports, obviously. But I was talking to my best friend who was here in Bali with me, and on a Friday night or a Saturday night, we will happily be in the gym training, and we will drag our training sessions out to be 4 or 5 hours, and we'll order food into the gym, and we'll stay even longer and do mobility and stretching and just hang out with our friends, listen to music. And for us, that's a really good night out. So, when I broke my leg, we were trying to figure out, like, what do normal people do? Where do they go, and how do they spend their time? I think, we were talking about life balance before. And one of the things that I really love about sports is that I'm able to train for, many hours a day and focus on my sport, but also do it alongside amazing people. So I've kind of combined my friends with training and playing sport. I think if I had to train alone all the time, I really wouldn't enjoy it as much.
I think the focus on the people who you're with for sure is the most important aspect of like figuring out what it is you would do for fun. Because I mean, you think of most scenarios I've been in that you can go to like the most amazing venue, the most amazing like music, whatever, but if the people you're hanging out with suck, like you just don't want to be there generally, unless you just like escape from them and you find somebody else to hang out with, which I've done before too. But so like even just hanging out, I mean, because the experience you have and being able to share those experiences with the people you hang out with, like that's generally the thing that pretty much stays consistent. So if you go to, let's say you just train the gym for 5 hours, or you're out in a club for 5 hours, whatever, not like, I don't think the environment really matters as much as the people that you're with.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's probably the main reason I don't really enjoy going out clubbing, is because it's so loud, you can't talk to people, you can't connect with people. Whereas in sport, I've really found that you can, and the shared experience is everything. That's why I love working with athletes and other coaches, because when you win something or you achieve something, it just means so much more when you can take other people on that journey with you and share it with them.
Well, I think people spend so much of their time like being stressed out from their jobs and their life that when they get to the point where they want to go out on a Friday night, they take part in all these things that essentially like
escapism.
Yeah, I mean, they go into an environment where they can't actually have a conversation, so they're just drowning out their thoughts, and they're actually having any kind of like intellectual conversations. They're drinking a ton, so they're obviously having some issues there. Maybe they slip a few drugs into their drinks or whatnot, or I don't know, who knows what exactly. But I mean, I think combining all this stuff, it's kind of hard to get through all these barriers and then still try to have like a decent conversation with somebody.
Yeah, I think some of that comes down to being an extrovert or an introvert as well. So I'm a massive introvert. I really enjoy having one-to-one quality conversations. It takes a lot out of me to be in a room with a lot of people. So I really have to kind of then recharge after situations like that. Why did you say really? Why are you surprised? This should not surprise you.
Maybe it's because, I don't know if I've never necessarily seen you like out clubbing or anything, but I suppose like on a one-to-one level, you seem very talkative and outgoing.
I'm terrified of people. I was always like the shyest person in the room, and I would never say hello to anyone, and I think people would think I wasn't very friendly, but it was more like, I can't say hello to that person. Why would they want to talk to me? Why would they even know who I was? So I kind of used to always hold back. But I think sport has been really amazing for sort of bringing out more extroverted qualities in me. Because it forces you to. You have to step on stage if you want to compete. You have no choice.
Yeah, but you still don't have to talk to anybody. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for talking with me today.
That was a lot of fun. Thanks for inviting me to come and join you on this podcast.
Thanks for coming, and I'm happy to see that your ankle is getting better.
Thank you.
And hopefully it'll continue to improve, and we'll see you
at Nirvana Strength.
Soon. Yeah, Nirvana Strength as well. And if Carli doesn't say hi to you or runs away, then
please come and say hello to me.
Don't be offended.
I'm just shy.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening in with Carli Dillen. That was a very interesting podcast. We talked a lot about her practice as a high-level practitioner. We look forward to having you join us for the next conversation. See you next time.
Until next time.
Until
Thanks,
next
Ian.
time. Bye.